in the startup world, an incubator is a place where people who have ideas can come with their ideas and say, "Hi, I have an idea. How can I work on this idea and make it become a business?" So it's how do we create an environment that allows founders to then say, "I want to work on an idea," and how do I interrogate my idea? What's the research I need to do? How do I know the customers I need to be approaching? How do I know the pricing I need to be targeting? How do I know how to build this thing? So how do I build a team? How do I know who to bring onto my team? An accelerator it accelerates the growth of your business. They're usually timed around 3 months to 6 months. An incubator, on the other hand, can take a longer period. It can be 1 year or 2 years, because we never know when we can't promise you that we're going to help you get to your good idea in 2 months or in 3 months or in 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. Are you guys, as an incubator, honest enough to tell someone that the idea won't work? For example,
I'm hated for that. That's part of the learning. So there's problem solution. So have you found a problem worth solving?
Yeah.
And that's always the question. Is it worth solving?
Yeah.
Some problems are not worth solving. How many solutions are you testing to try and solve that problem? Because we don't imagine that your first idea is going to be a solution to that problem. A startup is not ideally a company yet. When you start the startup, it's an idea. So you keep testing your ideas, but what you're trying to look for is a solution that will drive you towards a high velocity growth company.
One time like this, make it pop like this, make it knock like. One time like this, make it pop like this, knock like this, make it drop. One time.
Welcome to another episode of Mentorship Uncomplicated. I'm your host, Afshan Wallace. And as I've been mentioning on my previous episodes, this is a show where we have conversations with our friends, our colleagues, and hopefully get to learn something from that conversation. Today, I'm joined by one of my very interesting friends, Mr. Simunza. Mr. Simunza is the co-founder of one of the biggest and probably the pioneering incubators in Zambia called Bongo Hive. And welcome, Mr. Simunza.
Thank you for the kind invitation, Wallace. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, so it's an honor for me to have you here because you play a very important role in this industry, the startup ecosystem. And I've been privileged enough to have gone through what a startup feels like, and from the beginning to maturity and so on. And I personally, as a company, we've never been incubated. And as we grew, there are a few things that I came to pick up that probably an incubator would have helped in resolving. But other than that, maybe we can just start with a quick introduction of who you are and how Bongo Hive came to be, and how you got to meet your co-founders, because I know you're three.
Yeah.
And then we'll, through the conversation, we'll talk through the growth and up to where you are today.
Oh, great. First and foremost, congratulations on the growth that you've made. It's been exciting to, like most other entrepreneurs that we get in touch with. It's a journey. Building a business is a journey, and it's been exciting to watch your journey and the growth that you've made over the years. And there's no one direction or formula for getting into business and building a business, but there are definitely things that you might need to look out for. So the fact that you made it without incubation is just an amazing feat in itself, and speaks to, I think, your resilience and your vision as a founder with regards to the business. And with talking about Bongo Hive itself, I met my co-founders years ago, probably around 2009. I was working for an internet service provider called iConnect. They've changed their name over the last few years. They're part of the AfriConnect group of companies. And now the team that still runs it is now called INQ in Zambia. Okay. But I worked in iConnect. I was business development manager responsible for our website and SMS products. So now these are products that we used to offer to clients, whether it was helping them to get websites up and hosting services, or SMS products, which allowed them to then integrate with our SMS APIs, and so that they could be able to send out SMSs on behalf of their products. One of my clients, one of my co-founders, Lukonga, who's now the executive director of Bongo Hive, was a client of mine, actually two of them. So it's actually four co-founders of Bongo Hive.
Okay.
So Bart and Lukonga worked for an NGO called VVOB. They still exist in Zambia. They're in the education sector. Work closely with the Ministry of Education. But Lukonga was, I think when I worked for iConnect hosted the website for VVOB and did some other work for them. So Lukonga was the contact that I would get to meet with regards to anything they needed sorted out, with regards to stuff they needed with regards to their website and anything that they needed. Similarly, Silumesi, who's now the third co-founder. So if you say Bart, Lukonga, Silumesi, I met Silumesi, we would have conversations on Twitter. So something that I used to do would be, I'll be having conversations with people on Twitter, and if they needed something like, they were trying to figure out something and they needed a big download, working for an ISP, I would download that for them, and then say, "Oh, come over by the office. I'll put it on a USB stick. I'll put it on a USB stick for you." So people say like, "Oh no, I'm trying to download this thing and it's 1.5 gig."
Yeah.
Nowadays we don't laugh at 1.5 gig seems small nowadays. But back in the day, downloading 1.5 gig was like a ginormous. Even 500 megabytes actually. Was like a ginormous download. So I contacted him to say like, "Oh, why don't you come pick this up?" And because obviously of my background being a software developer myself, I understood what sometimes when people would have a hard time just getting that one thing you need to finish off a project, I'd work with them on that. 2 years later, I left iConnect. I started my own digital agency called Digital Ice. Again, still building websites, which was most of my career doing that. But what had happened in the ecosystem was the iPhone already existed as a primary smartphone. You'd probably say the first real smartphone to ever get into the market. Android was the next platform that came into the market. The reality was that the price of the iPhone and the price of the first Androids were not at a price point where most Africans were going to be able to afford them. But shortly after that, Huawei said they would release a $20 smartphone.
Oh, wow.
And that seemed exciting. So like, okay, great, a $20 smartphone. What's that going to look like? But it also now gave the imagination towards, wow, finally anybody can have a smartphone. If you can have a smartphone at $20, $40, I think it was $40 if I'm correct, then the idea of having a smartphone. So we would meet each other at different places, but the conversation around working together sparked off at an event where we were at the University of Zambia and somebody was talking about Android apps. And how those could be birthed. So because I was interested, I went there, found Lukonga was there. And whilst there was an interview going on, whilst the conversation was going on, somebody asked the question, but what is an operating system, or what is Android? And we asked how many people in here know what Android is. And in a meeting with over 20 to 30 people, only 5 people knew what Android was.
Oh, wow.
So Lukonga and I, during the tea break...
Were these students?
Yes, these were students at the University of Zambia.
Wow.
This was, around 2009. And when we had a tea break, Lukonga and I remained chatting like, wow, only 5 people knew what Android was. And we started having a conversation around that. And the question we asked ourselves is like, what do we do about what can we do about this? And we said, okay, great. Let's start mini workshops. So I reached out to Silumesi, who I already knew and had now, even after I had left iConnect, we hanged out a lot more. We would work on projects together. And I reached out to Silumesi, and Silumesi was keen on teaching. So it was sort of like his process of like, if he wanted to learn something, he would learn it and then teach it to somebody. Then he would get more confident at it. So he's like, I need people to teach. And I was like, great. So I told him like, oh no, there's Lukonga at his workplace has got some interns who are working in technology. why don't we start with those groups? So the three of us met,
Yeah.
then met with Lukonga's workmate Bart. Then we started hosting weekend sessions.
Okay.
So every 2 weeks on a Saturday, would meet, volunteer time to teach people just the basics of coding, setting up a server, the entry into how people can become software developers. That eventually led to us, fortunately being having an encounter with a lady who came through, visited, and Dr. Brenda Davis was her name, and she came through. She saw what we were doing, and she was and this, remember, we're just doing this on a Saturday every 2 weeks. She saw what we were doing, and she was touched and says, I love what you're doing. You're contributing back to the community. You're giving people skills. And she wrote us a check for $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah, no jokes.
Wow. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, she wrote us a check for $20,000. So that's when it was like, oh, this thing could become real. This thing could actually become a thing.
We can build it to something.
You could say she was our angel investor.
Yeah.
So she was our angel investor.
Did she ask for anything back?
No.
It was just a grant.
It was just a grant, $20,000. And we thought, okay, great, what do we do with this? And what we did was we used some of that money to bring in a Canadian to come and host a 2-week workshop on how to develop Android apps.
Okay.
And some of the apps that came out of that were Zambia's first constitutional app.
Okay.
So we were discussing the constitution at that time. An app was developed to discuss the constitution, to share what and other apps that people had ideas around. So we had about 20 people who attended it, different group of 20 people who attended it 2 weeks, learned how to develop Android apps, showcased them. We started a movement called Mobile Monday, where we'd bring corporate together to discuss the future of technology in Zambia.
So did you finally make it full time, or you're still doing it?
No, we were still doing it. So we were still doing it part time until. But the lessons learned. Now, I must say, part of the inspiration for what we were doing.
Yeah.
Part of the inspiration from what we were doing was based on what was happening around Africa at the time.
Yeah.
So hubs were popping up around Africa. We just didn't have the resources to set up a hub at the time. So that seed investment started driving us towards what that could look like. Lukonga had the fortunate chance to travel to Kenya.
Okay.
And when he went to Kenya, he went and visited the iHub.
Okay. Yeah.
And when he saw what the iHub was, we met with the founders of the iHub, Eric and Juliana, and we had conversations, and we're like, we're happy to support you with what you're doing. Lukonga visited the Google Kenya offices, Microsoft Kenya offices, like trying to find out, hey, we're trying to start a hub in Lusaka.
Zambia.
How would you support? And they were like, great. Now, one piece of advice they gave us was, great, you've started, but we need evidence of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So take as many pictures, take as many videos of the work that you're doing and post them somewhere. It shows the journey that you're making.
Yeah.
So that's what sort of like got us into like why we always use social media. It started at that point because the advice we got was make sure you have evidence for everything that you're doing. So every time we'd have a meetup, we'd take pictures, we'd run a hackathon, we'd take pictures, we'd go visit, would run Mobile Monday and have people visit, we'd take pictures, go visit the government, would take pictures and start putting them up on Instagram, on Facebook. We started a Facebook page, started putting this. This got the attention of there used to be a conference in South Africa called Tech for Africa.
Okay.
And in that year, Lukonga and Bart visited.
Which year was this?
This is probably around 2010. 2011. They visited Tech for Africa.
Okay.
In Johannesburg. I had been the year before. And that's how I met the founders of the iHub, because I had met them at the same conference, Tech for Africa. So then the next year, Lukonga went to Tech for Africa. Whilst he was there, he gave a presentation on what was happening. Now he had pictures. This is the room where we do the lessons that we give people on how building apps. This is people building apps. This is an app they've built, so for Sonoc and stuff. And after that, somebody else came to him and said, "We like your story. We like the work you're doing. What would it take to do it full time?"
Yeah.
And so they gave him a larger grant now. They gave us a larger grant. And based on that grant now, that allowed Lukonga to now move from VVOB to set up Bongo Hive full time.
Okay.
Slumesi and I continued part time. So we would contribute like 1 day a week, get into the office, help out or hang out. And then also because there was internet now that we had a grant that could pay for that. So now that there was internet, would work from the office, but then contribute and work, help out.
Yeah.
Get involved in a lot of the meetings and other things. So like supporting Lukonga, because sometimes it would get very, very busy and Lukonga couldn't be everywhere. Then
Yeah.
you'd find us now attending some of the other meetings in the due course. Fortunate enough around that, as you can tell, it's a case of fortunate accidents happening along the way. And fortunate to encounter around that. Now we moved into our first offices. We now had our first offices, but Slumesi and I are not yet full time.
Was this a place that we next to our old office?
No. This was in Olympia, down near Manda Hill. Our first place was very, very near Manda Hill.
Okay.
Behind Manda Hill, actually. Next to there's a lodge somewhere across the road there, and so we were there for a few years. And whilst we were there, again, that's when we started. Actually, that's when we started. Now the earnest thing of now how do we help startups? So that's when we'd hold hackathons. That's when we'd host lessons. I think the first group of lessons that we held were based on a series held by Y Combinator called How to Start a Startup.
Oh, okay.
And would show those videos, then have group talks, then help founders to think through this. Started getting to know people who were interested in becoming mentors. Slowly started getting, and those are the days I remember for the first few years of Bongo Hive, now when it had officially started or was officially registered, what people used to know us for was it's a youth club that's for young people who do tech.
Yeah.
That's where they hang out and so on. Because, I mean, no companies had really started. I mean, even if they were starting, it was like initial steps, people failing, people trying to figure it out, some people managing, but also just very, very... So we would get to meet everybody. I mean, the people that even now as founders in the ecosystem were very, very early trying to figure out their ideas. The tech people that that's when we were working with. We started we would start communities. So we had like developer groups, we had gaming groups, we had women in tech, Askana, which is now a full-time thing on its own, running on its own, which is like women in tech, and so on. They all started like emerging from around that time, and we got the attention of Comic Relief, who then said to us, "We want to support youth in Zambia towards building an entrepreneur ecosystem. Can you write a proposal for that?" We wrote them a proposal for that. That's what helped us to now say, okay, great. Slumesi and I then got full time into Bongo Hive. So that's sort of like a journey into like how we got started.
That's how Bongo Hive started.
Yeah.
Interesting story. For those who don't know, how would you define an incubator?
Exciting. An incubator, I think the best analogy is the incubator everyone knows, which is the traditional term incubator comes from when you'd take the beginning of something and take it through the process of it getting to birth. So like take an egg that is laid, put it in a place, put the right conditions around it. So it's not the proper conditions for an egg is it should be under the hen.
Yeah.
But if you take it away from the hen and put it under certain conditions, so you put it under right conditions, you put the right temperature, right lighting, right amount of humidity and everything, and then over a period of time it hatches and becomes a chick. So similarly to in the startup world, an incubator is a place where people who have ideas can come with their ideas and say, "Hi, I have an idea. How can I work on this idea and make it become a business?" So it's how do we create an environment that allows founders to then say, "I want to work on an idea." And How do I interrogate my idea? What's the research I need to do? How do I know the customers I need to be approaching? How do I know the pricing I need to be targeting? How do I know how to build this thing? So how do I build a team? How do I know who to bring onto my team? Whether it's your founding team or the people that you're going to bring on, how do I learn how to raise the money for my startup? How do I know how to take this to market? And this is not a 1 week process. It can take a period of time. So being in a community, and also just being in a community with fellow founders where you're working through these things, is what an incubator should ideally provide founders towards taking their idea to becoming a startup.
So most of the startups, when they join incubators, there is this expectation that they have that incubators will be able to provide. Some of them end up being successful, others don't. What do you think is the biggest misconception or the biggest expectation that startups have when they join incubators versus the reality of things?
All right, great. I mean, first I must say there are different types of incubators. So there are specialized incubators that might specialize on a sector. So you have some incubators that, for example, can specialize on agriculture or health tech. So if you look at Vilgrow Africa, based in Kenya, they focus only on health tech. So they only support founders at health tech. Some incubators like Bongo Hive, some incubators have a fund, so they are able to invest in the companies that are going through it. Some incubators do not have a fund and help you to access grants and funds that a startup might need in the process of growing. So Bongo Hive is a mix in the sense that it does, depending on the partners that we're working with, we can provide grants to some of the startups that we work with. We're in the process of setting up a fund to make sure that to also help us to invest in some of the ideas that we work with. So the greatest misconception every founder, whether you're in an incubator or not in an incubator, the greatest misconception everybody founder starts off with is, I have $1 million idea.
Yeah.
And probably 1 out of your 10 ideas is actually a very good idea.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. You might have an idea that starts off with getting customers, but then, as you know, at the end of the day, market size matters.
Yeah.
So the question is, how many customers can you actually get within a market, and is it at a market size that becomes worth investing in? So helping people and that's why incubators are important, because they provide you a place to start testing your ideas.
Yeah.
And to refine your ideas and getting towards an idea that you're going to work. There are a lot of ideas. I mean, you can talk, I'm sure even your story, if we look at it, is that when you started with your first idea, you've probably pivoted a number of times to get to and refined your idea over a period of time. And that's what most people don't see. So most people just think, they look at a company today and think that this was the original idea that it started off with. Most people will say that even if you look at Much and Evelyn of Lupia, the Lupia we knew when they started the idea is not the Lupia that you see today. It's gone. It's been refined over time, tested things over time, then got to a place where the realistic model of this is where the market is and this is what you can do and where it grows.
Is there a difference between an incubator and accelerator?
Yes, there is. So the idea with an incubator is you're getting support from idea to launching the business and the product getting into the market.
Okay.
An accelerator it accelerates the growth of your business. So it then says, it should always have a target. Are we accelerating your entry into market? Are we accelerating your investment readiness? Are you accelerating? So they're usually timed around 3 months to 6 months. So an accelerator has got a time period in which it says, we're only running for 3 months or we're only running for 6 months. And during this time, we're accelerating your growth to a certain point.
Do they fund it?
Yeah. So normally they would get funded. The accelerators might provide funding, and some accelerators might just take you through classes.
Okay.
An incubator, on the other hand, can take a longer period. It can be 1 year or 2 years, because we never know when we can't promise you that we're going to help you get to your good idea in 2 months or in 3 months or in 6 months.
Yeah.
It's as you know, it's a continuous cycle, depending on the sector that you're in as well. Whether you're doing B2B, you're doing B2C, and you know that responses on B2B are slower than B2C. The reactions that you're going to get on B2C, so B2B responses are going to be longer. It could also be the sector that you're taking. So Fintech, for example, is a regulated sector. You can't just go and start experimenting with people and collecting their money and so forth and so on other stuff. Is that the regulator needs to get involved in that. So the process of building a company might take longer, depending on the sector you're in, depending on the type of business that you're trying to do, and also depending on the team that you need to build to actually take it off. So incubators normally take longer. They normally take about 1 year to 2 years to support you.
Okay. Are you guys, as an incubator, honest enough to tell someone that the idea won't work? Because, for example,
I'm hated for that. that's because but people don't realize that that's part of the learning.
Yeah.
Is being able to, and it comes from another place because obviously I don't know everything, but there are things like I think your knowledge increases based on what you learn as well.
Yeah.
Having seen different startups, having seen different ideas, and what we've learned about markets.
Yeah.
And having had conversations, you've got to be very, very curious, both as a founder, both as a person from an incubator and accelerator. You've got to be very, very curious. So I sit down with people and say, I don't understand solar, I don't understand electricity. What are the needs? Where are the market opportunities? What are the different things people can do? And just meet people in the energy sector and start learning like, oh no, there are problems here. This is where this happens. That's why this happens. And my mind starts like, oh, that's a challenge. Maybe digital could help that there. So when I'm meeting a founder, then it makes it easier for me to say like, have you looked at that point there? Because I've had continue having conversations with different people.
Yeah.
But also within that period, you also learn to say, yeah, every person who's tried this business has failed because of this point. So that the next person comes to you like, have you solved this? Have you solved this? Have you looked into this?
Yeah.
And also from meeting helping people go through failure, we also learn in that process to say like, oh, this has worked. So sometimes when people come to like, oh, we have this there, we want it to work, we're like, well, have you looked at this regulation? If you haven't, then it's not going to work. So it's not that we're just telling you that no. It's always conditional in the sense of if you haven't solved for these things, then the possibility of your idea working might be one. And two, sometimes it's just market size. It's just that, yeah, or let me rephrase it this way. The first thing that I look for when I'm listening to a person give me an idea is if I don't understand the pain you're solving.
Oh yeah, the problem that exists.
Problem, yeah. If I don't understand the pain or the problem, and it should be a problem or a pain, or the value should be providing should be significant enough to say, I can see why somebody would want to pay to get rid of that problem.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue that startups or founders have. And in my previous episodes, I've mentioned how the easiest way for me to come up with an idea is just to look for a problem.
Yeah.
And then once you look for a problem, you look for a solution. Even if the solution exists, you can find one that exists and see how you can make it better.
Yes.
You don't necessarily have to always be the one coming up with new ideas, educating the market and the public, which is always expensive and takes time. So I know for a fact that even when you incubate a company, there's... the founders still have to put in work.
A lot.
You're still running a business, basically. A lot. What is the drop rate? What is the success rate? Let's assume that you pick 10 incubators, 10 businesses this year to incubate. Of course, they have to go through the process, the grind and the hustle. And how many of them come through?
So at pre-seed level, the pre-seed. So I'm saying pre-seed level. So levels of investment are considered pre-seed, seed. Then you get into VC, whether you do your Series A, and then hopefully you get to a place where PE funds are interested in. So pre-seed is the level where you are. Let's talk about it in terms of founders actually will use. So there's problem solution. So have you found a problem worth solving?
Yeah.
And that's always the question. Is it worth solving?
Yeah.
Some problems are not worth solving.
That's true.
So have you found a problem worth solving? And how many solutions are you testing to try and solve that problem? Because we don't imagine that your first idea is going to be a solution to that problem. But and as people normally say...
That's a good way of looking at it, yeah?
Yeah. So it's like fall in love with the problem and keep trying to find different solutions to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And then one will take on. I need to take on in the sense of like it actually works. And two, it will take on in the sense of like customers actually recognize how it helps them.
Yeah.
And more importantly, people are willing to pay for that solution. So idea of you coming into an incubator is, testing various assumptions. And as you're testing those assumptions, you're testing them against the problem and trying to see which ones actually take off. So think of yourself being in an incubator as being a scientist in a lab. Your first experiment doesn't work. So you keep trying all of these experiments until you find one that says, okay, great. If we take the website this way, or if we add this line, or if we add this functionality, or if we take away all of this functionality and just leave this one thing, that's what people actually want. Until you get a confirmation where you say, oh, we've noticed that 10 people are now paying for this thing. We've noticed 15 people are willing to pay for this thing. We've noticed 20 people are willing to pay for this thing. Now let's focus on this thing and let's see how far we can go with this thing. So at problem solution fit, the assumption that is made worldwide is that 1 out of 10 will succeed.
Okay.
This, knock like this, make it drop. One time like this, make it pop like this.
What do you define as success? Do you define it as how long it lasts, 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, that will actually grow. So that will actually grow into a company. As in, like, from the people that have come in with ideas, you're supporting them, but you also know that some will grow, but probably not. So if you work under the assumption that by definition a startup is a group of people working on an idea and testing it until it. So a startup is not ideally a company yet. When you start the startup, it's an idea. So you keep testing your ideas, but what you're trying to look for is a solution that will drive you towards a high velocity growth company.
Yeah.
That's what differentiates startups from SMEs. Now, there's some where we accept that is this high velocity growth. So now what there's some where we accept that this startup is just going to become an SME. And that's fine.
Yeah.
If the founders are happy to run an SME.
Yeah.
We're not saying everybody should take on the pressure of building a startup. That's a different pressure in itself. And if that's your goal of building an SME, that's totally fine. But if your goal is like, we want to get to this, the famous, we're trying to become a unicorn, a zebra, or impala, depending on the different definitions, then you start working towards, okay, great. If my solution says that customers are willing to pay X amount, how many customers do I need to get valued at X amount of money to become a unicorn?
Yeah.
Or how many customers do I need to be growing at a rate of 20% year on year? Then you become a gazelle or an impala. Or we have a social impact thing. Then we said, becoming a zebra. So
most people don't know what these terms mean. Yeah.
I don't know why they use animals, but there are various animals that they use to define a company when people are deciding what company they want to invest in.
Yeah.
So then within that conversation, then you're saying, okay, great. If I'm trying to achieve, so a good test for your startup when you get customers, a good test for your startup. So once you move from problem solution fit, you've now figured out a solution that probably will work. What you're now moving to is what you're now trying to get to is you're trying to get to a market fit. And trying to get towards the market fit is you're trying to say, okay, great, can I grow? A good question I would ask myself as a founder is, can I grow my customer base or my revenue at 20% year or 20% month on month? Then you're possibly onto something.
Okay.
If you can possibly increase your customers 20% month on month in your early stages.
Okay.
Then you're onto something. Then a growing company after that, I think by second or third year, then we'll start looking at, can you do 20 to 30% year on year growth?
Okay.
And then that says, okay, great. Now this is defined as a growing company.
Okay.
Yes. So in the first year, we're hoping that you do it 100%. And so that's why we say 20% month on month to try and accelerate your growth. And we know it's hard, and that's why incubators exist to support you to try and get there.
As we proceed, I wanted to ask, out of all the companies you've incubated, which are your biggest successes, and why?
So I guess we've supported a good number of companies in different sectors. So even though we're known as a technology and innovation hub, Bongo Hive for the most part has been, and due to the demands of the market being in Zambia, for the most part has been Sector agnostic, meaning that any sector we're happy to support businesses in any sector.
Okay.
With a leaning towards technology, but we've also supported businesses that are non-tech.
Okay.
So we've seen non-tech businesses grow. So you've got the likes of My Perfect Stitch, good SME, not technically not a startup, good SME with good growth year on year. Started out in fashion, has now started adding things like interior design and furniture and a number of things. We're always happy to work with startups that we work with. So helped to our new space designed by My Perfect Stitch. Fintech, Premier Credit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Premier Credit went through our fintech accelerator, Fintech for You.
That's huge.
And we supported them with their first raise.
Okay.
So we still remain very good friends with founder Chilufia. Amazing entrepreneur. We've supported Bosso in its initial idea of a company which was based on retail, still in retail, now focused on hardware. The founders of Bosso recently raised with Renew Capital. That's another company very, very proud of, very, very hardworking. Founder who used to be in Zambia, no longer is in Zambia, and Java Mtambo, first startup, delivered Musanga, similar to what you're doing. Same thing, supported him in building his businesses, took those lessons, built his next startup based on the lessons he learned from his first startup. So sometimes the growth journey is that even if your first startup fails, it's the founders who take the lessons from that and say, okay, great, this is what worked and didn't work. And we find it interesting that sometimes they still come back and say, okay, great, I'm starting my next idea.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask.
Like, I'm starting my next idea. Let's go through this again.
That's what I wanted to ask.
So I was like, oh, okay, so so even if you failed, you actually appreciate you actually appreciate the process. And they're like, yes, no, and now I ignored these things, so now I want to go through them properly. Let's do them, and let's build my second startup now again in that way, yes.
Which I think people really don't understand the necessity of having a founder that is ready to keep going and going, because the founder, there's a very big there's I don't want to say a gap, but the business itself is as important as the founder.
It is.
And I believe that the founder really, and especially now if you look at how the VCs are investing, the founder is a key player in them considering whether they invest in you or not.
Yeah, that's a significant piece.
It's a significant piece, because you need to be able to, even when you fail, because not everything is going to work. And I can guarantee you for a fact, based on experience, the failures that you will go through are unbelievable. But you need to be able to ask yourself, can I do this again? And I also feel like entrepreneurs go through, which is also another point we have to talk about, the stigma of if something didn't work, what are people going to think about me? Because, for us, if you're building startups, and any good or big step you make, you announce it. So it's out there and people are looking at you as this guy. But then sometimes things don't end up working the way you expected. And mentally, that can be draining. Do you have incubators found a way of preparing entrepreneurs for this?
Yes.
Because it's a very big issue. Based on my experience, I mean, it's an experience that unfortunately most of us have to go through. But then what do you do, and who do you go to now after this?
Yeah, the dark side. So yeah, you brought up something that people rarely talk about, and it's phrased as the dark side of entrepreneurship, and everybody likes to talk about the highs. You've got a growing company, you're raising money, you've got billboards, you've got this, that. But people rarely talk about the lows that founders go through. And you've got to look at it from, first of all, there's this ambition to get something off the ground. And with ambition, with ambition comes the strong possibility of failure, especially when you come to innovation. When you're starting something in an innovative field, you're pioneering and you are doing something that hasn't been done in that market. It may have been done in another country, it may have been done elsewhere, but you are starting it in a place where you may not have the same infrastructure that other countries may have to get that off the ground. And that infrastructure or ecosystem includes the people understanding what it is that you're trying to do. So yes, you're right. The stigma around whether you fail, who's around you, but also people always forget the responsibilities that entrepreneurs take. Now, I don't care whether you're building a unicorn or whether you're running a shop on Cairo Road.
Yeah.
You're taking on a huge amount of responsibility. The number of people that you employ, the taxes that you have to pay, and meanwhile, you're fighting with suppliers who might not pay you on time.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not because the idea is not working. It's just that you supplied and your supplier is not paying you on time. And you still have to pay salaries. And you still have to, at the month end. I mean, I often say entrepreneurs should have a coffee group where we all just sit down and talk about this month I made it to salaries that close.
And your
employees don't know that that's what you're going through.
And we all need to be very honest with each other because I've been in business for 17 years now.
Yes.
And I think I've come to understand how business is really run.
Yes.
And I can grant you for a fact that if you sit around entrepreneurs and just be honest with each other, you actually come to understand that all of you are probably going through the similar issues.
No, we all go through the same stuff.
We all go through the same stuff. But we've got this. We feel like we need to show that we're not going through those issues. And like I said, this show, even when we talk about the dark side, is we give people opportunities to learn, and that's the only way to learn.
Yeah. So that's that. So from an incubation point of view, what we've done before is there was a period when we had a coach, amazing coach, Joe Pope, who would give her time for free to meet with entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So she would have like entrepreneur circles. So she would meet, I think it was about 10 entrepreneurs at the time in a group, and just providing a space where people could talk and get things off their chest and talk about what they're going through and meet weekly and just have like tools that they can use to frame things and go through things.
Some therapy.
Yeah, because sometimes the defeats that you're going through, sometimes the defeats that are going through are beyond you. And sometimes they come in series. Sometimes it's like you're going through 1, 2, 3, 4 things at the same time, and you woke up like, have I been bewitched?
It's one after the other.
Yeah, because they're just coming one after the other. And you just start wondering, like, what's gone wrong here? I remember one time having to say something on Twitter. I think they were talking about, there were 2 ladies with a business and they were going through a cash crunch.
Yeah.
And we've all been through cash crunches. Like all of us as entrepreneurs, if we're honest, we've all been through cash crunches. But this one was like, I think they had borrowed money and there was an asset that was going. And people started going about, yeah, you see, and look at who they are, what they do, so on, kind of stuff. And I had to do it like, you see, it's this attitude why, as entrepreneurs, we never tell you the truth.
Exactly.
It's this attitude why we never tell you the truth, because if I hear the bailiffs or whoever has gone to a business and gone to pick up things, having built a business myself, it never comes to my mind to say like, oh, that guy was an idiot, or that guy was that. The question I asked like, what happened?
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, great. What were the revenue points? Then I'm like, it's never a sudden thing. It comes from, and sometimes there are things where the universe or things that are happening are out of your element.
Yeah.
I'll give you the perfect example. 2015, there was what you'd probably call Zambia went through the perfect storm. Yeah. We had a drought, no rain that year.
Yeah.
We had load shedding, and we had the kwacha devalued against the dollar.
Yeah.
Now, put yourself in the position of any business that had borrowed money in dollars the year
At that
before.
time. Oh my goodness.
You've got a kwacha devaluing, and you're in agriculture, so there was no rain, and there's load shedding,
And you're making money in Kwacha.
and you're making money in Kwacha.
And you have to pay in dollars.
So then other people who are just looking on Twitter will be like, oh no, look at these guys, they don't manage the businesses properly. Like, guys, what was he going to do? What was this guy going to do? What were they going to do?
Nothing.
They're going through they're going through a storm.
Yeah.
So it's helping people to understand those things, like, no, storms happen, and entrepreneurs, we talk to each other. And that's the thing. We end up talking to each other behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And we end up like, it's when you see us having dinner, it's not like we're not having dinner and celebrating. It's we're having dinner, exchanging notes. And I've had conversation with some of the large entrepreneurs that are known in Lusaka or in Zambia. And when we have conversations with them, you almost have a sigh when you have like, hey, so how's the last 3 months been? You almost find that like they almost sigh with like, oh, I can be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like I can be honest with you. This last month, I went through this. I lost 30 people on my team. I know businesses that you admire on social media, and I'll be like, yeah, that company is losing people on its team 30% every year.
Crazy.
And not because they're a bad company, but just because of the industry they're in, what's happening, so on and so on, all kind of stuff, different generation of people and all kind of stuff that's going on. So it's not always that, oh, everybody wants to say, no, it's because the boss is toxic. Sometimes there's also things that an entrepreneur has to navigate. And you have to build a company that is navigating that course, in the sense of your company is almost like a living thing.
Yeah,
you started off with this business plan, and every 3 to 6 months you're adjusting the company because next thing the government said this, ZRA said that. The next time you're like, oh, what? Now we have to make adjustments. Then you hear, no, there's a war in that country. Oh no, now we have to start making adjustments. No, the price of fuel has gone up. Then you have to start making adjustments. Because that was not in your plan. It was never ever in your plan. So it's a living thing that keeps getting adjusted.
Yeah, I think I couldn't have even said it better. And I like the fact that I think mature entrepreneurs really meet and talk about this stuff that they're going through, and somehow you feel at least you're not in this alone, which I guess somehow helps. What do you think Zambian startups or companies need to do for them to be able to scale out of Zambia? I would, for example, in my case, so we're looking at doing, we're actually getting into these two markets, DRC and Zimbabwe.
Oh, congratulations.
We consider ourselves as a Zambian startup.
Yes.
Even if myself, I'm not.
It's a Zambian company.
Yeah, the company it's from here. It's got Zambian shareholders and so on and so forth. But I would. There's a lot of. I see a lot of room, and first of all, I see Zambia as a huge tech hub. I think there's a lot of room for us to, especially in the Southern African region, for us to have a lot of developers, software developers, and so on, and we can export that to this other South African countries.
I agree.
But what do you think, or what do you feel Zambian companies need to do to position themselves as companies that can scale out of Zambia?
So I think Zambia, as you rightly put. Now, first of all, to address the fact that I think Zambia's always been very accommodating of Africans. We've always been. That's in our nature. That's in our blood. If people don't know it, I'm half Malawian in any case. So it's always been a place. It's always been a country that is. So if you're here and you're doing something great and you're doing something positive, we're happy to accept that. So yes, AfriDelivery is a Zambian startup.
Yeah.
Whether you're from Kenya or whether you were from Nigeria or whatever the case may be, it would have been like. And the truth is, if you talk to the various ecosystem players, that is the long-term goal. The long-term goal is to continue making Zambia a place that attracts founders from across Africa to build startups from Africa. And that is only a benefit for Zambia at the very end of the day, because if we look at AfriDelivery, there are over 100 families that benefit from the services and I'm talking about have jobs
Yeah.
because Afri Delivery now exists
Yeah.
in this country. So the conversation around, the argument around that founders Zambian or not Zambian is like, it's a Zambian company.
Yeah.
They start there, and it's growing in Zambia, and I'm happy to hear that you're expanding. Now, what we now need to do to make more of this happen, to get this growth going on, I think over the last few years, we've positioned ourselves as a country that has that provides amazing opportunities for companies to be registered, to be set up, and to be built out of this country. So, PACRA will give you registration within 24 hours. If you do it online.
That's true.
ZRA will also give you registration within 24 hours if you put your applications on there. So getting registered in Zambia makes it very, very easy getting started. If you get through all the regulatory compliance, you finally get a company within Zambia, you can get started. So then the question then becomes, do you have a customer base worth growing into and then growing? What I think we need to do now as Zambians is to now open up to the idea that if you're doing B2C companies, Zambia's got a very small population.
Yeah, that's true.
It's 20 million people. So, and depending on whether you're targeting rural or whether you're targeting urban. So you need to be building a solution that you can say, okay, great, and you can plot and say, from Zambia, my next target, from Lusaka, my next target is going to be Lilongwe. From Lilongwe, I'm going to Harare, or I'm going to, like you're going, whether I'm doing Kinshasa, Lubumbashi. Why not even do Nairobi? Like, these are the markets that I can penetrate because I've got them. And that could be the same thing if you're doing B2B.
Yeah.
Is you could say, we've built this. It works well with this area, this sector. Let's dare to think outside the box. Zambia's primary revenue generator is manufacturing, and a good portion of that manufacturing is our mining industry.
Yeah.
So let's say we decided to support mining tech and started getting those people. Figure out how to get technology working explicitly well in an African mine, and then start taking it to all the other countries around Africa and the world that you've got a place where you can experiment well, because there are new mines being set up. You've got artisanal mines that are small. You've got large mines. So how does technology work inside there? Logistics, like what you're doing. A good portion of everything that you get on the stores is logistic.
Yeah.
So how do we optimize logistics from everything from petrol to food to whatever it is that needs to get to people? And then because we're centrally located, we take advantage of that and then saying, how do we make sure that technology plays a part in anything that needs to move within Southern Africa, around Zambia, the 8 countries around Zambia, and using technology to make sure that it moves efficiently.
Yeah.
So there are amazing opportunities that allow people to then see that they can get to a larger market. And then but what you're talking about with the software development piece, that also becomes a critical factor as well. And I think we're getting there in sense of like the talent that can actually develop enterprise level products is growing. But what we are finding as startup founders is that you're competing with corporates for the talent. And then you're competing with the outside world for the talent, because now you've got software developers in Zambia working for international companies.
So they'll come and take the talent that you're... Yeah.
No, they're already taking them. They're not even taking them to a country. They're choosing to live in Zambia. I know software developers who have chosen, they could have had the opportunity to go and work in New York.
Yeah.
But they've chosen to live in Zambia because that exchange rate is sweet. Is that if you're being paid in dollars and you're in Zambia, you're balling.
That's true.
And you could live in a good house as opposed to living in a small apartment in New York. And because all you need to do is know when to ship your code.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yes. So it's things like that. And I think we should invest in more of that. We should invest in more of that talent being available so that anybody who has an idea can get a technical co-founder. Or any technical co-founder can meet another person and say, okay, great, let's build a startup in fintech. Let's build up. What you want to be able to do is that, I know that you've got a tech background and you're able to build platforms yourself, but you should be able to say like, great, I'm expanding to the next thing, the talent exists for me to get to bring on. I don't have to worry about bringing on my next 3 developers, my next 5 developers, my next 10 developers for what it is that we want to do.
Do you think that developers are... for example, for me, I feel like I got lucky to be able to get a tech co-founder.
All right.
I keep telling fellow startups that, especially new ones, that for you to be able to build a sustainable business, tech co-founder is very fundamental.
Very fundamental.
Because you cannot, it's very expensive for you to keep paying through developers as you go, because
It's a terrible model.
it's very unsustainable. But do you think the talent that we have here has that mentality that I would be willing to be part of a company for the long-term returns instead of me joining a company where I get a good salary for the next 2 years?
So I think part of your primary job as a founder is selling a vision. So
Convincing them.
Yes, so that's a primary job. The same way you need to convince investors, the same way you need to convince customers, it's the same way you need to convince people to become your co-founders. And part of that is, can you help people see the vision that you're seeing?
Yeah.
So if you're saying that, listen, this is lacking in the market, and if we do this, it will, and it potentially gets to this point. If you've thought that through, you should be able to tell a person to say, like, if we build this platform, we should be able to get to this point. And hopefully somebody can get convinced with that. I think the challenge most people have is just not being able to convince other people.
Yeah.
Because, well, of course, life happens. People need to pay for rent. People need to pay for food. So that's why they might be slow.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of co-founders that you talk to. There are a lot of CTOs that you talk to who started off part-time. Like, they were coding at night. They had a full-time job working for, whether it's a bank or whatever it is. But in the night they were now building this startup. And then the visionary founder was going out selling, but at least he had an app that he could go and show people to say, like, this is what it is, this is how it works, this is how it's being tested. Then when they got their first thing, CTO jumped, left his full-time job and then came full-time into it. So these things can be done. We're human beings. These things can be discussed.
Do you think you're building too many apps instead of, because, for example, like our business, let's call it a distribution business.
Yeah.
Whatever we're distributing has to be manufactured somewhere.
Okay, yeah.
Do you think you're building too much tech and then forgetting that part of the business?
First and foremost, when we talk about solutions, I hope that what we try to help people see is, don't go in with the fixed idea that it needs to be an app.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is find out what helps the customer achieve what it is that they want to achieve, or what helps the customer do the job they need to get done. And if in the process of doing that, you find that you need to build an app, then that's the solution. If it needs to be a website, then it needs to be a website. If it needs to be hardware, then it needs to be hardware. So I don't know I think people get obsessed with apps.
Yeah.
But the question then I fundamentally ask is that what the customer is looking for? Does the customer want to do this by looking at their phone? Or does a customer, can it be something that can be done by USSD? Can it be something that can be done on a website?
Yeah.
Like, where's the customer when they're trying to make this decision? If the customer is at their desk when they're making this decision, then maybe what they need is a website.
Yeah.
Because they're at their laptop, they'll go to a laptop and they'll be able to do it on the laptop, as opposed to pulling their phone to start trying to sort things out. So, but it also means that there are opportunities in every place. Now, I'm not saying every startup should be a tech startup. I lean towards tech startups because that's my background. I'm a software developer. So it's very, very easy for me to understand tech. But then I'm not saying everything should be a tech startup. You can do, good example, Good Nature Agro. Good Nature Agro is an amazing business. Found an amazing niche. And they do farming. Now they're adding I don't know how many years later, Sandy and Kawa are now finally adding technology to their business.
Yeah.
And that's because they want to expand. And they believe that technology will help them to get that expansion. But if you primarily look at what they're doing farming. And if you look at what they're farming, there's a huge demand for the stuff that they're growing. I mean, like, I wouldn't have thought of I'm going to go and specialize in seeds and I'm going to specialize in legume seeds. But they saw that opportunity, found the place to build it, and they continue. Good for them. They continue scaling
and raised capital the other day.
And last year they raised. I think was it $8 million. So
was it 8 or 18?
18. Yeah, you're right. It was 18.
Is that the biggest raise in Zambia?
No, the biggest raise. I don't know what So The thing is, raises are not normally announced because I think one of the hotels was $20 million. So the raises happen. It's just that they're not. Yeah, no, they're just not always
Do you think
announced.
it's a good idea to announce them?
It depends on what you're trying to do. It also depends on the stage and it depends on what you're trying to do. So
Okay.
so announcing also gives so it's usually a conversation between the investors and the startup. So announcing gives confidence that that other people have found that you're doing something good, so they're willing to risk their money
Yeah.
inside you. So it signals to the market. So in the early stages, announcing helps to signal, because remember your runway. You may raise your first $250,000. You know that this is runway for your first year or
Yeah.
your first 6 months. So you're going to be back in the market raising your next amount. So what you're announcing is to almost warn the next set of investors to be like, oh, we'll be coming for our $1 million, we'll be coming for $2 million, or we'll be coming for $500,000 by announcing that. But then there are some who just like, great, it's an operational business, it's growing, announcing doesn't make any difference for us. So we'll just keep growing. And if you look, and it's interesting if you go and look at some of these investors, how you know that is you look at some of these investors' pages for their portfolio, and you're like, oh, they invested in this company,
Exactly.
this company. Like, there was never an announcement for these. There was never an announcement for some of these investments they
I've seen
made.
that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How do you think we can protect Zambian startups? By that I mean you build your startup in the country, but then you're going to compete on the same level as anybody that comes in with
Yeah, that's a good question.
a lot of money, and then
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good question.
I once heard this question being asked at a panel that I was sitting at, and the response that one of the guys gave was that we should teach Zambian startups how to raise capital so they can compete. I feel that that's true, but also
That's just one answer.
but let's just be honest. Raising capital from here is not the easiest thing. Maybe you might have had a different experience, but I know it's pretty hard, especially because of the market size.
Yes.
And also, I don't know about the culture of Zambians themselves investing in startups. Because if you look at some of these big markets, the investment comes from within. So you've got a good number of VCs within a certain market that are like, you know what, any startups emerging from this market, will fund them.
Yes.
Angel investors, I think Ziban is probably the only one that.
So it's first one.
First one, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I think I think what we also need to realize is you're right. The imperfections in the ecosystem are very real. When you say there's not enough capital at VC level or at angel level for startups, that's true. But on the other hand, we also fortunately are progressing.
yeah.
So the fact that a Ziban started was out of the fact that there was nothing, and then Ziban got formed to get that. When you talk about trying to get more capital available for startups, the National Advisory Board for Impact Investment is trying to work with various players to coordinate them to see how more capital can be made available, whether it's capital through VC or capital through banks or something like that. That is it. So, and the government, of course, keeps trying to aim. But the first place is that you have an environment that is welcoming. So yes, Zambia fortunately is. So if a fund was to set up, funds that are setting up in Zambia have the fortunate case that, for example, right now the Zambian government does not tax capital gains.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, and they haven't done so since the 90s. So, meaning that for people who want to know, simply put, is I'm not a technical finance person, but simply put is if I invest in Afri Delivery today and you're valued at 100,000, and my shares in there, I buy 10%, and so my share is 10,000. If you over the next, let's assume that I maintain 10% just for the simplicity of this example. If you over the years grow the value of your company to 500,000, means my 10% has grown from 10,000 to 50,000.
Yeah.
Meaning that I've grown by an extra 40,000.
Yeah.
In Zambia, there's no tax on this extra 40,000.
Oh, wow. Do people know that?
It's been in the law for years,
But is it communicated?
Yeah, you see, so those are some of the challenges. So Zambia is an amazing place to invest in for that reason, because if you see growth, you're not taxed on the
Because
growth.
that should be on our pitch deck. When you're pitching to these investors, they should be
Yes, you
knowing
should
that.
tell them that there's no capital gains tax in Zambia. They won't see any tax on that growth that happens there.
Yeah, I think we need such information. We can communicate it.
Yeah.
So is Bongo Hive setting up a fund? Is there a fund at Bongo Hive?
Yes, we are. We've designed the fund, and we are going out looking and knocking on doors to see if we can. So same way that you go pitching as a
Our
startup.
office is open.
Same way you go pitching as a startup is the same way we're now going to pitch
Yeah.
to LPs to put money inside the fund.
I think, investors also raise money from somewhere.
Yes, yeah. So it's the same thing. It's the same job. So when people look at us, no, you're just telling us to pitch. Like, we do the same thing. We also hear no
All the time.
We also hear no all the time.
So would you be looking at investing in fewer SMEs or more smaller startups?
No, starting early stage.
Early stage.
So the idea being we want to bridge from where the ZBAN invests. So we're trying to get angel investors. We're trying to encourage angel investors to take the first round.
Okay.
So the first $20,000, $50,000 up to $100,000 that a startup needs. We're trying to see if if the angel networks can grow to the place.
Okay.
And I say angel networks with the idea that hopefully we'll get more angel networks in Zambia.
Okay.
So that angel networks will get to a place where they can take that round. So that now we have local ownership inside businesses, because more Zambians have invested inside a business. Because also what people forget is that the value that angel investment brings is not just money.
Yeah.
It's the shareholders become your mentors. They become the people who connect you. If you're doing agriculture and get an investor who says, yeah, I know how to open the doors at ShopRite. I know how to open the doors at Shoppies. I know how to open the doors at whatnot. Like, be strategic don't just get the money. Be strategic about the people that you bring on as investors. So we hope that value happens to companies, and it's already happening. Then the next layer is, what happens when you need your next, now that the angels have invested, what happens when you need your first $200,000, $250,000 to $500,000? We think that you shouldn't be running off to all over Africa looking for $500,000.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that investment can happen, whether it's co-invested or invested purely within Zambia. We think it should be able to happen within Zambia, because we behave like there's no capital in Zambia. The money is there. You have PE funds in Zambia,
Okay.
who invest on the larger side.
Yeah.
So like I said, go and look at their websites. You will see that they're making investments.
They just
but
don't announce.
They're not announced. But they're making larger investments. They're making investments in $5 million, $10 million, $15 million investments. So they're making a lot larger investments.
Okay.
But they also, when I talk to people in the PE funds, is they're saying, yes, but we need pipeline of companies. So you guys need to start investing at the lower end to help accelerate the growth of these companies, so that we can, when Afri Delivery needs $5 million, the offices are there in Lusaka. You can find them. They're there. Yeah.
As we close this, Mr. Simunza, this is just a personal opinion.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
The boy child. I want to talk about the boy child
Yeah,
today.
sure.
I've seen a lot of funds, competitions. What else? Some of this set up basically for the girl child.
Gender lens investing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think the boy child is getting forgotten?
Not necessarily. I think the trick with these things is that you first have to acknowledge that there is an imbalance, and the process of correcting that imbalance, you have to place resources. You have to place more resources on one end until it goes straight. So I think what we're seeing those resources now being placed on this other side to bring it back into balance. If you look at the numbers, number of female founders that have raised investment is pretty low. I think it was as much as Africa alone. I'm not even talking about America and other places. They've got their own statistics.
Okay.
But Africa alone, you probably had about, if I'm correct, you had 4% female founders who raised money in the last year or the other year.
Okay, that's huge.
So which means 96% is male. So they've not been forgotten. They've succeeded at getting that 96%. They've succeeded at getting that 96%. If you look at the quantum of investment that has been there. Now, I know it's not as simple as that.
Yeah.
However, so what I continue to motivate for is in trying to get to the balance, and which is where the thing is like, let's not forget about this side. Let's not forget about the side that may have been on the advantage as we're trying to bring it to place that is that we're not trying to say it's like the whole. I think Nelson Mandela said it best for me. I think during the struggle for independence in South Africa, I think it's his famous speech at the Rivonia trial where he says, "I'm not fighting for black dominance." It's a long speech, but one of the sentences right there is that in fighting for struggle for independence, we're not fighting that black people should dominate over white people.
Yeah.
So in the same thing, when you come to creating a balance, is that we're not saying that by correcting it, we're then saying that everything should now go, and then it should now become 4% men and then 96% female.
Yeah.
We're trying to get it to a balance where we say, can it get to a place where it can at least hopefully get to 50-50?
Okay.
And within there, within merit, what we want is the best companies, whether they come from a black person, a white person, a male, a female, a Lozi, or a Kikuyu, the best ideas should win.
Do you think that's achievable? 50-50?
Pardon?
Do you think it's achievable?
Why shouldn't we try?
Yeah. If you look at it like that, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then. I think I've asked all my questions.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Simunza, and thank you for honoring this invite at very short notice.
Thank you for the invitation. I think what I'm excited about what you're doing is when we started Bongo Hive was, of course, as an incubator, we work with founders and building them. But then we always believed that the idea was to always get an ecosystem that goes beyond us.
Yeah.
Of people that want to support entrepreneurs, because that's how all ecosystems grow. Is you've almost got to get like a city or a nation that believes that entrepreneurs can succeed, and they're proud of the companies that they see.
Yeah.
You want to be proud that. We want to be proud that we see an AfriDelivery. We want to be proud that we see a Lupia. We want to be proud that we see a Premier Credit when they grow into other countries. We want to say, those are Zambian companies. We all want to be very, very proud of that. Yeah. And the only way that we get very proud of that is if we all as a city or as a country start contributing towards that.
Yeah.
And part of that contribution is mentorship.
Yeah.
And so when founders get to a place where they can give support to, and incubators operate over inviting people to be mentors.
Yeah.
And if a founder who's already been through the trials and everything is able to say to that guy who's starting to say like, boss, don't go near that fire there. Yeah. I know you're not seeing it, but there's fire there because I've been there. I got burnt. Move this way. Yeah. Then more people succeed faster. Yeah. Because they don't have to go through. Just because you did it in 5 years doesn't mean you should tell everybody to do it in 5 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
You should be able to say like, guys, it took me 5 years. You should do it in 1 year.
Exactly.
Avoid this, do this, and succeed a lot faster. 100%. So what you're doing is contributing towards that. So it's an honor to be here.
Thank you very much. This has been Mentorship Uncomplicated. It's always a pleasure to have these kind of conversations, and we'll keep bringing you more. As I mentioned, this episode is sponsored by AfriDelivery. Download the app or go to the website afridelivery.com.app and get whatever you need delivered to your doorstep. Thank you, Mr. Simunza. Don't forget to download. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and share this with your friends. Till next time. Cheers.
Thank you.
One time like this, make it pop like this. Knock like this, make it drop. One time like this, make it pop like this.